that's the second lesson, is to talk about love. Last time, love really has two sides, right? The love that Jesus has for us, and that's what we focused on last time. Now we're going to see how we can reflect that love toward others and share it with others. Yeah, what about it? That'd be so awesome if everybody came running down the stairs. Let's go! Do it! All right. That was probably really funny to those people at home who had no idea why I was pumping my fists like that. And they'll never know. If you're watching at home, it's going to be a mystery. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's begin with prayer, and then we'll get right into the video. We pray. Heavenly Father, continue to teach us your love through your word. Fill that love, or let that love fill our hearts, and let it inspire us to love others. As we learn about how we might evangelize and what we might do to share that love, we ask that you be with us, strengthen us. Help us to overcome the uncomfortableness that often goes along with it, the awkwardness that we might experience. Help us to see that our goal is simply to love, and that you will take care of all of the rest of the results. We pray this in your name. Amen. All right. Jay, my light guy, he's going to be over there. Are you going to help me out again, Jay? Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get started then.
Welcome back to Let's Go. In our first lesson, we were reminded of the remarkable, incomparable love our God has shown us in sending his Son to save us from our sins. It is a love that continues to bless us as he takes care of our every need. It is this amazing love of our Lord that motivates us to love people he has brought into our lives. And that is what we are going to be reminded of in our second lesson. Not only is it God-pleasing to love those around us, but it plays a critical role in reaching them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Pastor Tim Spiegelberg will help us understand why this is the case, as well as give us some guidance in how to do it.
Are you nervous? Nervous about witnessing, sharing your faith, or even engaging on a deeper level with a world that increasingly seems set against it? This is kind of where Pastor Bitter left us last time. We learned why we go. The message of Christ is transformative and life-saving. We learned where we're going, to a world, society, and culture which is vastly different than it was even 40 years ago. But the question is, why do we go? Well, in short, love. Love motivates us to push past our fears, anxieties, and nervousness. Love for God and souls is the motivating factor. What will happen? How will people respond? Well, only God knows. We can't control the response, but we can be willing to be two things which we'll focus on during this study. We can be present, and we can be persistent. Teddy Roosevelt knew how important both of those things were. He once famously pointed out that showing up and being present is what is critical, whether things go our way or not. Here's what he said. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Now there's a lot to love about this quote, but the best part is that it encourages us to show up and to be present. It urges us to be willing to be vulnerable even when we don't have all the answers or feel as though we're equipped. Far too often we're on the fence rather than in the arena. Now if that's scary, then you're on the right track. And here's some encouragement. God consistently does incredible things when his people show up and are present. In fact, he led by example. Take 5 minutes to review the story of Zacchaeus' interaction with Jesus and answer the following questions. Feel free to pause the video now as you work through the study guide.
So that's where we'll start today. Then we're going to take a look at the story of Zacchaeus. And again, this lesson divided into two parts: be present, be persistent. We're really focusing on the presence of Jesus, the Jesus being present in the situation. There's a lot that we can say about Jesus here as he deals with Zacchaeus. But I think that's the one that we wanted to sort of keep at the front of our minds, how he was present. So let's talk about that. Let's begin though by reading the story. It's 10 verses, but we'll take a paragraph at a time. If I get volunteers to read, that'd be great. So we got 1, Mark 2, 3, 4, and then Sharon, you're the fifth one. Okay, go ahead. You're starting.
Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see him with the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way.
Yep, keep going.
When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly.
All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner."
But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount."
Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost."
All right, so like I said, a lot of things going on here, but we're going to focus in on just a few things. So question number 1, consider Zacchaeus' life. What earthly reasons might he have had to want nothing to do with Jesus? So let's just start there. Consider his life. And hopefully this is a familiar enough story where you maybe know some of the ins and outs, understand what Zacchaeus was and what he did that might give him a reason ever to want anything to do with Jesus. Go ahead, Mark.
He saw himself as a guilty sinner, if you will, whether he realized it or not. He knew that he was guilty. His life was not
All right.
honorable.
Yeah, so that's going to be the big one. He saw himself as a sinner. And isn't that going to be so often a barrier between a person who doesn't know Jesus and Jesus? Well, what would Jesus want to do with me? I'm a sinner. He's God. Oil and water, we don't mix. I'm nothing. I don't want anything to do with that. So that would be one side of it. And what would make Zacchaeus a sinner? So maybe we can get into some of the details of his life. We know that he was a tax collector, which has a couple of implications. First of all, tax collectors were known to overcharge, right? And they would pocket the difference. They were known to cheat people. And then there was another thing that made tax collectors especially despicable in the eyes of the Israelites. This tax collector, most of them. What's that? Yeah, they worked for Rome. I mean, they were traitors. They were working for the enemy. So being a tax collector was not, you could get rich doing it, but society would not hold you in high regard. And Zacchaeus would have understood that. So society doesn't hold me in high regard. Jesus and I, we don't mix. We don't go together. Maybe another reason why Zacchaeus would have not had any reason to have anything to do with Jesus. I kind of hinted it already. Did you pick up? Yeah, his earthly needs were met. He didn't need anything from Jesus from an earthly perspective. All right? What similarities can you see in Zacchaeus' life to the lives of those in your community? So those two things. He felt he was a sinner, didn't belong, and he didn't really have any need of Jesus from an earthly standpoint. Do you know anyone like that? I think we all do, I'm sure. People that you know. Doug?
Well, it's just kind of like the common thought is you go to God in prayer when you need something.
Okay, yeah.
And then, it gets portrayed in TV shows or something. They start talking to God.
Right.
They need to get about it.
Yeah. Lord, I don't ask you for much. Well, that doesn't seem like a good thing, right? I don't ask you for much, but I'm going to ask you this one time. That's not how it works. That's not how it should work. Yeah, so I think a lot of times that's what society sees with God. When I need something, I'll go to him. Otherwise, not so much. Because they don't see the bigger picture, obviously. Right. Sharon?
Another one might be, we call it the self-made man. They're successful, they came from nothing, and they're successful, and I did it by myself.
Right. I did it by myself. And so if I get into trouble, I'm going to fix that by myself too. Right? I don't need Jesus. That's the way we see things. Because again, we're looking at things from an earthly perspective and not the broader picture. I don't know. When I was in college, my parents had a neighbor. I didn't see him too often, didn't know him too well, but he struggled with alcohol. And one time, just talking across the fence, he's like, "Hey, you're studying to be a pastor?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's right." He's like, "Oh, you wouldn't want to have anything to do with me then." Now that was kind of his mentality. He thought, I wish I had something better to say than, "Oh, that's not true." And that was about where it ended. I wish I could have had conversation with him, but I was an idiot back then too. So, but okay. So I think we probably know people. We understand people are sometimes in that situation. They feel like they just can't come to Jesus because the guilt is too great, whatever it might be. So I think I kind of looked at the other. Oh, Gloria, something to add to that?
I just think the big thing is his peers. He would have been really, he felt awkward. They would have looked at him like, what? You know what? You're going to this guy?
So that guilt would come not only because of his thoughts about what Jesus thought about him, or what he was thinking there, but also his thoughts about what other people thought of him. And I think if that was what he was thinking, he's kind of proved right here because the people said, "What's with this Jesus guy? Here he is eating with sinners." And okay, but before we get to that, let's take a look at the next question. For all the earthly reasons Zacchaeus may have had to not be interested in Jesus, something was missing. He understood that. What was missing? Joel? Yeah, if you have that much guilt where you think Jesus wants nothing to do with me, so I want nothing to do with him, there is a lack of peace. And that lack of peace might be the thing that makes you climb up into a sycamore tree just so you can look at Jesus as he's coming. And who knows what his end game was, right? I mean, it worked out really well for him, but who knows what he was thinking? He just wanted to see. He climbed up so that he could get a peek and maybe figure it out along the way. I don't know. Looking at the last question, Jesus knew how important it was to be present. What concrete steps did he take to make sure Zacchaeus got what he needed? He invited himself. He said, I'm gonna go to your house today. So I think that's a great example, and that's what Pastor Spiegelberg said. This is an example for us to see Jesus as an example. That it might happen where we find ourselves present in somebody's life by accident, or we find ourselves present, but we don't really know what's going to happen next. Jesus, of course, was intentionalized that and we're going to hear that word. He said, "I'm going to be present, and I'm going to make sure that it happens. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today." And then he went to his house, and they shared a meal. Mark, did you have something to add?
Yeah, in verse 5, I guess a question that I have is that Jesus revealing one of his acts of God by calling him out by name. Do we have any information or background on what Jesus knew who he was? Kind of like, who was it sitting underneath the tree and told him to go tell his brother?
Yeah. That's a good question. So with that one, Jesus sitting under the tree, he might have had some familiarity with those disciples. He might have just known. But Zacchaeus, there's really no reason that we know of that Jesus should have known who Zacchaeus was. And so maybe a divine act. And that's the thing too. Jesus is the example. Of course, it's a hard example to live up to. Jesus knew what was going to happen when he went into Jericho that day. And he knew what was going to happen and he knew Zacchaeus already. We're not God. We understand that. So we can't be expected to know where we're going to end up meeting someone somewhere in our life, and we can intentionalize that being present in their life. So that's good to think about. But Jesus knew what was going to happen, and while we might not know all the details, maybe something that's the example we could take away. we know it could happen, it can happen, and maybe, even though we're not God, we can figure out ways to make it happen. All right? Oh, no, don't do that. Oh, okay. This is not my computer. My computer has some audio issues, so if this thing, goes away, somebody's going to have to run down and get Pastor Helwig and have him enter his PIN. I don't know. All right. So I think that does it for Zacchaeus. So let's go on to the next segment of the video.
Jesus was the man in the arena. He showed up. He came close and was present in the life of Zacchaeus. Jesus invited himself into Zacchaeus' home. Jesus knew how important it was to be near people. In truth, our world also knows how important that closeness is. There's actually a term for it. It's called propinquity. It comes from the Latin word for nearness. What research has found is that the longer you're near someone, the more likely you're actually to like them and understand them. It's also known as the proximity effect. There was a study of that proximity effect in the 1950s at MIT. Thousands of World War II vets were returning home and had enrolled. They lived in 3-story dorm rooms. Their relationships among one another were studied. What was found is somewhat intuitive. Those in the same buildings tended to become friends. Those on the same floors even more so. And interestingly enough, those who lived close to stairwells developed friendships between floors. It's the proximity effect. Fast forward to today, and the same could be found in the workplace. There's a story about Steve Jobs when he worked at Pixar, the makers of Toy Story. Jobs so valued relationships that he spent incredible amounts of time designing the headquarters for Pixar. Jobs obsessed over creating casual encounters. He funneled them toward each other, people toward each other, because he knew that when people were in close proximity, ideas, creativity, and friendships came naturally. One story goes that his original design had a single set of bathrooms in the middle of the complex, so everyone would have to run into each other. They talked him out of it, but the idea of communal space stuck not only at Pixar, but in all of Silicon Valley. Google's Googleplex is a single-floor labyrinth of coffee shops, communal space, open areas, and comfortable seating. They have a 150-foot rule that no one is more than 150 feet from food, so that as many people can run into each other as possible. Facebook's new campus has one of the largest open concepts in the world where people can come near one another on a regular basis. Now, all of this, which is touted as revolutionary, isn't anything new. The Bible and Jesus' ministry revolved around relationships. Someone once said, it's a lot harder to hate people close up. We all know that to be true because proximity matters. Okay, so propinquity, proximity, and closeness matter. But practically speaking, how do we actually do that? That's a great question because much of life encourages us to isolate. Now, I'm not talking about pandemic levels of isolation or common sense steps for hygiene, but from the size of our homes, their location, and the amenities inside, they all lead us toward isolating more than engaging. And so closeness takes some intentionality on your part. Greg Fink, author of Joining Jesus on His Mission, has some great ideas on how to intentionalize closeness. He uses math. And before you check out, I'm terrible at math, and even I can make this math work. I took Fink's thoughts, tweaked them a bit, and we'll call it proximity mathematics. Here's what it looks like. Unhurried time plus proximity plus doing something, which usually involves food and drink, will result in conversations. Conversations plus a willingness to be vulnerable will lead to friendships, and friends share what's important to them. Now, that's the type of math I like. It starts with setting aside unhurried time. If you need to schedule it in, then do it, but set aside time to simply be present. Add to that a closeness with your neighbors, family, and friends. Saying yes to the birthday invites. Barbecuing in your driveway rather than on your back porch. Add to that something to eat and drink, and what will naturally happen are conversations. Now, take those conversations and add to them vulnerability. A willingness to talk, not just about sports, politics, or the weather, but about life, kids, the stress of work, marriage, When you're willing to be vulnerable in your conversations, your unbelieving family, friends, and neighbors will be as well. In fact, they crave it. Now here's the best part. Some of those interactions will turn into actual friendships. And what do friends do? They share what's important to them. And what's more important than Christ? His love, his life, his assurance of forgiveness, his insistence that every human being has value. Love compels us, urges us, pushes us forward to be present and to present the gospel. Sharing your faith isn't rocket surgery, but you do need to show up and be present. In this next breakout section, work in small groups or individually to determine all the places you already are present and some ideas for new places to be present. Please pause the video now as you work through the next series of questions in the study guide.
All right. So I forgot to mention, as you, and I think many of you caught it though, as the video was going, you had a chance to fill in some blanks with that proximity math. Is that what you call it? Proximity mathematics, propinquity, what all of that means. Everybody get that? Latin word for nearness, known as the proximity effect. Everybody got those blanks filled in? If not, raise your hand. I'll go through. So,
I missed the one, first one in Latin, what
Latin word for nearness. Yeah. I don't know what the Latin word for nearness is, but I'm sure it's related to the word propinquity. Pretty good feeling. Yeah. Say again. Propinquita. There you go. There's your Latin word for the day. Or for the year. For the year. Okay. Proximity mathematics. So doing these things creates conversations. Conversations and vulnerability create friendships, and that's a good thing. But in order to have that, you have to be present. So we're going to take a few minutes here to brainstorm and to come up with a list of communities, your communities, different places where you find yourself near, in close proximity to other people. So if you want to just do this by tables, we'll do that, and we'll come up with a list. Okay? We'll spend a few minutes, and if you want to move chairs, you can do that too. If you want to turn around, you know. Karen and Jay, you don't have to work by yourselves. You could work with the Finchams if you want, or the Petersons. Or if you want me to come over and sit with you, I'll do that too. You don't want that, though. No, you don't. Understood. I'll give you about 4 minutes, maybe less. Maybe less. Let's just do the first one for now, and then we'll get to the other one. So let's make a list of our communities first, and then we will make a list of how we can get into those communities. All right, do we have a list? You want me to write a list up on the board? Yeah, let's do it. That way we can keep track of what's been said and what hasn't been said. So make a list of the communities where you might find yourselves. So we got 2 already. We got your kids' sports game, so that one's out. Where you get your morning coffee, that one's out. I get my morning coffee in my kitchen at home, so that doesn't work so well. Although there's a lot of evangelizing that goes on there too sometimes. What do we got?
Came up with the grocery store.
Yeah, grocery store. I think if you, especially if it's like a regular weekly activity where you do it at the same time on the same day, you're going to end up seeing the same people who have that, and so you can start to be present in somebody's life. What's next? What else we got? Work, gym. All right, yeah. Gym's kind of a weird one, though. You go to the gym, you're there. Most people don't want to have conversations. Most people don't. They got their headphones in, and they're there to work out, and it's kind of rude to interrupt somebody when they're working out. I did that to Laura once. I still feel guilty about that. You were in the middle of a set, and I came over, and what am I doing? I should know better than that, but we still talk. So. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, there's a good one. What else? What else do we have? Neighbors, yeah. And so, yeah, that's a good one to talk about as well in the next. Am I spelling this right, Liz?
Somebody brought up dog walking.
Yeah, so I think, so we'll talk, that I think comes up in the next brainstorming list that we're going to have. But when you talk about getting into your neighborhood, how are you going to do that? Push a stroller or carry a leash? I see that a lot. Anything else? Are there more? There we go. Bridge club.
Sports activities.
Yeah.
Like yours,
Like,
like golfing or
oh, there you go.
playing basketball.
Yeah, going to the park playing basketball. You can be.
Hairdressers.
Oh, there we go. Tom, what were you going to say? VFW. Salon, not saloon. Although. School? Here, yeah. School, and you know, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic too. When we have a school here, there is the school community, a church community is sort of one and the same, but not always, not completely across the board. But we know there's a lot of members here who send their kids to public school, and that's a way to find a community there. There was a pastor down in Texas who lived pretty close to a well school, but he didn't send his kids there, and he wouldn't. He would always send his kids to the public school because he felt that was a great way for him to have an in-reach into the community. In fact, I think he served on like the PTA or something like that. So he was very intentional about doing that. Any other really good ones? You have a good one? Yeah, and so I think that can be sort of included here, but then even beyond the school itself, it's because of the school that your community gets extended and broadened. So, anything else? All right, let's take 2.5 minutes and talk about the next question. Brainstorm ideas about how you can become present in the communities where you find yourselves, among the people around you. So, great example, you walk a dog or you go to a dog park, and people stop you all the time, especially if you have a really, really beautiful greyhound. People just, I think we're known as like, oh, that's the couple with the greyhound. We're walking around in our neighborhood, and I don't know of anybody else who has a greyhound. So. All right, so just take a few minutes to brainstorm a list, and I'll erase this and get us ready for the next one.
the unfortunate thing about it, because a lot of workplaces don't have. Oh, there goes.
You're gonna go to sleep again? John, you're going to sleep. John, you're going to sleep. Don't.
He doesn't have a pastor protection.
He went to go get pastor. I'm sure.
Yeah, he did. He didn't hear me.
We're good.
We are.
We're good.
We're good. I thought it was gonna, lock screen or whatever. But... All right, should we do a quick list? Brainstorm. What do we think? Ideas for being present in the lives of people around you. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, we've had. I've had more
Don't be on your
people say
phone.
this about
I think that's just yeah. So.
I would say everybody look that way.
And I think that's good. That's just good. Good etiquette. Good way to make sure that you are present. You're not doing this. But to intentionalize becoming present in the community among people. Do you understand what I'm saying? Did you were gonna add to that or?
No, I was gonna add what you had, the list.
Oh, yeah.
During COVID, we had our new driveways for happy hour.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh,
We did a lot of that.
What, we had a DJ with professional speakers.
I remember you said that.
My handwriting is getting worse by the moment. And that's kind of one, the example. If you're going to have a cookout, do it in front of your house, and people walk by, or sit out there with a bottle of wine, and as they come by, you have a couple extra glasses, something like that. DJ a block party. Now that's pretty specific there, Scott. That's all right. I don't know. It's interesting. So I'll give an example. Kind of run up. My dad loves coffee shops. That's where he gets his work. He loves to write, and so he goes to coffee shops to work. And so sometimes he'll sit by the kind of near the bathroom because people are always passing by, and his laptop is always open. And once in a while, somebody asks him, "What are you working on? What's this here? What's going on?" And that's a way that he becomes present. And there was when he was in a small town in Alberta, Carstairs, he would go to this Starbucks or this coffee shop all the time. Or maybe it was a town over, I don't know. But there was a couple there, two older people who struck up a relationship because they went to the same coffee shop. And then they find out that he was a pastor. And so he married them. They got engaged, they got married, and he married them in the coffee shop because that's where they met, and that's where they met him, and they knew he was a pastor. So. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I watched the news story. You know what steampunk is?
Yeah.
It's that weird goggles and top hats. And that was the theme for the wedding. I asked my dad, "Where were your goggles on your top hat? Why didn't you have that?" He was just wearing a suit. Anyway. So yeah, there are things that you can do to be present. We're going to go on, just in the interest of time, we're going to keep on moving. Just a very short video segment here, and then we'll do some more Bible study looking at Jesus with the woman at the well. So we've talked about being present. Now it's time to shift to being persistent, and that's the goal coming out of this story of Jesus. No, that turned off.
Okay, so now you've highlighted the places you already show up and are present. That's the easy part. I know, maybe this has already been hard, but this next step is so important, not only for the people you'll share Christ with, but also for yourself. You've got to not only be present, but also persistent. Remember when I said it's a lot harder to hate people close up? That's true. But if we're being honest, sometimes people are simultaneously harder to love close up because they're people. Relationships are at times painful, sinful, stressful, bothersome, just plain hard. Relationships involve interacting and, in fact, loving people who don't talk like us, vote the same way we do, value the same things, have similar histories, nationalities, or views on the world. In short, when you show up and are present, it's going to be messy. The lives you impact, the homes you enter, the conversations you have, all will involve a degree of messiness. And so you've got to be willing to be persistent. And here's some encouragement. Some of the best things in life come from the messy places. Your Savior knew this to be true as well. Jesus looked at our messy world, at our messy lives, and loved us enough to be patient and persistent with us. Jesus, compelled by love, not only showed up, but was persistently loving. Here's a great example of Jesus doing just that. On your own, look up the account of Jesus' interaction with the Samaritan woman and answer the questions below. Feel free to pause the video at this point.
All right, we're going to do just that. Let's read through the story. I've divided it up into 4 sections. So verses 1 through 9 to start with. We'll just take one volunteer at a time, but I would like volunteers if you don't mind. Okay, Laura, start with verses 1 through 9.
Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son, Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well, and it was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews did not associate with Samaritans.
All right, who would like to take the next section, verses 10 through 15? Volunteer to read that. Carrie, thank you.
Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you of a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water."
Thank you. All right, next section, 16 through 19. Or, I'm sorry, 16 through 20. Read that. Trigan?
He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem."
And then the final section to the end. Who would like that? All right, Shuri, go ahead.
"Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We sure worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he."
All right. So here again, a great example of Jesus not only being present. I think we can take that out of this section too, but now here we're focusing on his persistence. And think about what he did. Some backstory, and you probably heard this before too, but Samaria was not a place where Jews would travel, and a lot of times the quickest route from one place, from southern Judea to the north was through Samaria, but they would take the longer route and go around just so they didn't have to go through Samaria and deal with the Samaritans. Jesus intentionalizes that. Here's him being present. I'm going to take this route that nobody usually takes, and I'm going to go. And I'm going to go to this well. Now, he knew what he was going to encounter there, right? Again, he's God, we're not. But he knew, and he wanted to put himself into that situation, and he knew that it was going to be messy. So what reasons might Jesus have had not to be persistent in this relationship? And I've kind of explained some of it already, but
It was the Samaritan woman.
yeah, the Samaritans and Jews don't get along. They don't mix. They don't go together. So Jesus could well have said, well, those aren't my people. I'm going to just stay away for now. What else? Not just the ethnicities, but... Oh, okay. So she and Jesus knew her sin, and we don't always know the sin that people have in their lives before we meet them, but Jesus knew, and that could have been a reason for him to say, well, she needs to work on some things first. One other thing too. Oh, Doug, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine just tired from the journey, sitting down? I think we've probably been there. Not today. Maybe tomorrow when I have a little more energy, but not Jesus. Also, women and men being, just being alone and speaking with each other, that wasn't, it's kind of frowned upon. So that's another reason Jesus could have said, I'm not going to go into this situation. I'm not going to have this encounter. All right. Good. All right. So we see Jesus being persistent. In spite of all of the obstacles, he goes forward. And he has this conversation, and in this conversation, there's some messiness that's exposed. Jesus already knows this. It's interesting. I just kind of marvel at that, where the woman says, hey, give me some of this water. He's talking about the water of life. Give me some of this water. And Jesus immediately changes the subject and says, why don't you go get your husband? See, we're going to talk about that instead. It's something he can do. Might be a little tougher for us, but he certainly is going to be good at it. Let's talk about that. What parts of this woman's life may have looked messy?
She had 5 husbands.
She had 5 husbands, and no longer are they her husbands. And now she's with a man who's not her husband, but she's living with him as though he were. All right? So definitely the woman needed to work on some things as far as sanctification goes. There was some sin in her life. And again, that could be uncomfortable. Certainly would be uncomfortable for us, not for Jesus. I don't think he has to worry about that. But you can understand. You can see how messy it would be. So Jesus brought something to her messy life. It's like Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus had a messy life too. There was some persistence in that respect on Jesus' part. He brought something to him. Salvation. Salvation has come to this house. Jesus said, she's talking about the Messiah is coming, and then we're going to figure it all out. Jesus said, that's me. All right, so there is some, he didn't come in and say, now he addressed her sin, he addressed the messiness of her life, but he didn't say, here's how you're going to fix things. You're gonna marry your husband or marry the guy you're with, and you're going to have that relationship. And he said, I'm the Messiah. I'm here to save you from your sin, and that's pretty big. Okay, so that's where that evangelism took place. All right, so we're going to go on now, and we're going to talk about how we might apply this persistence practically in our lives. While we're watching segment 4, you can answer those 4 questions there. All right, we got an illustration from an artist that Pastor Spiegelberg is going to talk about here. So see if you can follow along, answer those questions as we go. Chris?
I know that this obviously doesn't cover all the scenarios, it's not meant to cover all the scenarios, but do you think that there is a difference in this particular example that we have where the woman recognized her sin, and many of the situations that we're going to deal with people, that's not going to be prevalent. They're not going to recognize it in the first place. So there is another step prior to.
You're absolutely right on all accounts. That obviously, just no, just in this situation, just for the last 30 seconds. Okay, easy. No, the point is not to answer every single possible scenario or question, but you are absolutely right. Jesus addressed her. She probably recognized her sin. She was sheepish. She said, "I don't have a husband." Yeah, you're right. We may have something else that we have to to tackle when we are present in the lives of others. But I think that, first of all, that's the persistence that's required. All right, we don't see that particular example here in the story, but it is going to be there, and that's also part of the proximity effect that he talked about, where when we are close to somebody and we are having conversations and we become vulnerable, those conversations can happen, and we can talk about the stresses of sin, and we can talk about what's right and wrong. It gives us an opportunity to do that. All right. Good question. All right, let's go on.
There's nothing easy about living and sharing Jesus in the messiness of life, but it's in those places where God does some of his best work. Are you a destination person or a journey person? Here's what I mean. Do you love getting to your destination, or are you able to enjoy the travel on the way there? Some of you might be RV people. Maybe long road trips are a joy. For me, not so much. Ask my family and they'll tell you I'm a destination guy. Just get me to the beach or the mountains, then I'll relax, but barely talk to me on the way. Now, for travel, that's okay. But how well does that work for relationships? Yeah, not so much. In truth, witnessing and sharing Jesus takes time, patience, and consistent relational investment. There's actually a term that I think describes our witnessing and living this side of heaven: liminal. Liminal comes from the Latin word meaning threshold, but refers to transitional spaces and moments. Traditional liminal spaces include airports, train stations, bus stops, and any location which is transitionary in nature. Did you know that churches have also been considered liminal spaces? Church is a place where we are reminded that life is only transitional as we look forward and look toward our eternal home, but it also empowers and lends urgency to our witness. We work, speak, and share Christ while it is day to the millions of travel-weary souls around us. Albrecht Dürer's work as an artist can serve as a good example of this liminal living. He was an artist in the late 1400s. Here's a painting of Dürer's, which is exquisite. The realism and the details, it's incredible work. Dürer lived during a time of transition. The Protestant Reformation had turned the Western world into chaos. Riots occurred, war was omnipresent, and life was tenuous at best. Maybe that's why Dürer worked so hard at realism, seeking in some way to try to control the crazy environment around him. And Dürer was legendary for his detail and for his dedication to his craft. He worked incredibly hard on dimensions and details and plans. The results were undeniably excellent. Those paintings were done while focusing all his energy on one outcome. But this next painting wasn't an example of his focused energy. If I didn't tell you, you'd never guess that this one was also one of Dürer's paintings. The reason why is that it was painted from a dream. It's vastly different from the other paintings. This dream painting has elicited all kinds of reactions from art lovers. I kind of like it. But you have two ends of the spectrum from one artist: meticulous and focused versus dreamy and emotional. Here's one last Dürer painting. Now, you may not love art or know of Dürer, but my guess is you've seen this painting and its image. Maybe you have one in your house or in your church. Praying Hands is arguably the most famous of Dürer's art. You'll see it on mugs, t-shirts, necklaces. Justin Bieber has a tattoo of it, and it's on the tombstone of Andy Warhol. It's pervasive. But here's the interesting part. It isn't a meticulous finished product nor a dream watercolor. It was actually an early sketch meant for a larger religious scene. That scene was destroyed in the 1700s, but this original sketch remains. Now, which of these three pieces of art do you think best represents what outreach is like? You may think that it needs to be like the first, meticulous and perfect with nothing going wrong and no surprises. Or you may think it needs to be like the second, completely unplanned and unintentional. In reality, however, outreach is more like the drawing of the praying hands. You want to be intentional enough to know where you want to go, but flexible enough to know you can't predict what will happen. Sharing Christ is always a work in progress in our liminal lives. It's messy and sometimes feels unfinished. There are times when you share Christ and never see the end result, or when someone else builds upon what you've done. Yet we share in trust, in prayer, and knowing our Savior walks with us. So, life is liminal and transitionary, and yet Durr knew where he was headed with his praying hands sketch, and we could use some direction as well. I've got 3 suggestions for you. The first is to be intentional about contact with unbelieving family, friends, and neighbors. Be persistent, as in, don't give up. Timing matters, so be present during the big moments. If someone invites you to a birthday party, say yes. If someone dies or is ill or is struggling, show up and be present. You don't have to have all the right words, but being there matters and absolutely says something. One pastor I know has said, be the best neighbor your neighbor ever had, which is a pretty good rule of thumb. The second point is to be vulnerable. Be willing to have deep, hard, messy conversations. Don't be surprised that when you do show up at that party, somehow you end up having an intimate conversation with someone about the struggles in their marriage, the hardships at work, or questions about God. There's a good chance they know you go to church and will assume you're a person who can help them, and at the very least will listen. The last one, be authentic. And I know this word's been overused just a bit, but my dad always used to say, be who you is, which is poor grammar, but a good reminder to be who God has made you to be. There's no bait and switch. Someone once said, before you invite a neighbor to church, it makes sense to have invited them to your home. Remember the proximity math we talked about earlier. And don't be surprised that not only conversations happen, but friendships too. And so be honest and transparent along the path. In this next breakout section, work in small groups or individually. Talk through messy lives of these believers, looking for the above aspects and remembering the motivation for persisting in this liminal space, which is namely love. Please pause the video as you work through this section in your study guide.
All right, we'll take a couple minutes to go through those questions as the video was playing. Hopefully you caught some of the answers. You could fill them in there too. So maybe we'll just take the first 2 sort of together. You could take either side you want to. The dangers of thinking that outreach needs to be perfectly planned and carried out, and then the danger of thinking that outreach is unplanned, unintentional, and just sort of improvised. And you could just take them together, weigh the pros and cons of each. What do you think? Did you write some stuff down, Tom?
You'll never finish planning.
Yeah.
You'll always think of something else. Oh, we should try this. We should do this, and you'll never actually finish the plan.
And that's okay, right? It's okay to never finish planning, and that's where the danger of having it meticulously planned out can come in, where you think, okay, we've reached this point, now we're done, or we didn't follow the plan that we had. Therefore, we're just going to scrap it, right?
I was thinking of another way that you never feel you're done planning, so you never feel you can go out with
Sure. That could be the thing too, where you're in the planning phase and you're never done planning and you haven't accounted for every single detail, and so you never carry out the plans that you have. Yeah, good. I think all of that, well done. Thoughts on that or anything else, Mark?
Whether you plan out this big parade of actions that you want to take to get a result, or whether you wing it, at the end, you may or may not see those results or those fruits. So then that always kind of adds that, what am I doing?
Yeah, right. See, and that's the thing. When it comes to things that aren't evangelism, outside the church, you have plans, you carry them out, you complete it, and you think, I did it. We have plans, we carry them out in this messy organization called the Holy Christian Church, and we get to a point where, like, I don't know if it worked or not. I don't know.
That's not your job.
And that's the thing. We have to keep that in mind. We do the work, we leave the results in God's hands. And we don't feel that our work was a failure because we don't see certain results that we expected to see or wanted to see. And so it's important. In other parts of our lives, yeah, that's the way it works. In the church, No, not really, because the results are happening in God's time according to His will, and we don't get to see either His timing or His will. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, at the same time, so we've kind of harped on planning. Planning is bad, but at the same time, if we don't plan and we just wait for it to happen, then it's probably not going to happen. So he talked about those things being intentional. That's a big part of it. You think about how can I'm going to find a situation or create a situation where I could put myself into it and be there, be present, and make a plan to do that. So the different artist rendition or the artist's works and how one is meticulously planned out, one just sort of happened in a dream, and then there's that middle space where it was planned, but the plan didn't come to full fruition for him. It didn't quite work out the way he wanted it to, and yet at the same time it becomes a beautiful work of art. So a good way for us to look at evangelism in general. Chris?
Well, I was just thinking about the word intention. I mean, we often think about intention, at least in my mind, I often think about intention as the idea that, hey, we're going to be thoughtful about what we're going to do. But I think the other part of the word intention is making sure that we're intentionalizing why we're doing it. So when it
Sure.
comes to planning, we're not going to go through some process. Hey, we're going to go through this evangelism activity because this is what we do. But it's more important to think about why we're going to do that, what our objective is.
Right. So, yeah, so the why becomes as important as the what. And if we miss one or the other, it's probably not going to work out the way we want it to. And so then that applies here too, that when we focus on the what, we're able to focus on not so much that we forget the why. So we make our plans, recognizing that what our real goal is out here, and maybe those plans don't get us there. Maybe we have to adjust things, and things have to be flexible, and that's the point here, right? Because we're still focusing on the why. Okay, that's going to be it for today. There's really the end of the video is just sort of a conclusion. Next week we're going to get to the listen portion of Love, Listen, and Lead. If you want to take a couple minutes to go through this list of people of the Bible and talk about their messy lives and what happened, and you could do that, but it won't be in this class. We need to call it for today. But thanks for the participation. I appreciate the good work we did today, and it was enjoyable. We'll close with the benediction. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy